welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 373, and today's date is May 23rd, 2014, and the title of this episode is Former NSA Chief Says More Terrorist Attacks on the Way. So let's all be prepared for a false flag event. And we have to look at what is going on here, and we really can start to form a picture of why they've been building up Al-Qaeda, more terrorism, and they're continually pushing their agenda to get into every single country. And when I say they, I'm talking about the United States government central bankers. We see in Syria there are elections coming up. The paid mercenaries are making it very difficult for Assad to remove those chemical weapons. And of course, England, United States, and other countries are saying that he is holding these weapons, he's stalling, he's actually hiding chemical weapons and biological weapons, and we see a huge buildup of military forces in Jordan. We see a huge buildup of military assets in Jordan, and we see they're having an exercise of 13,000 plus soldiers in that area the same time the elections are going on. This is not a coincidence. This was planned. This was done on purpose. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they understand they will be striking into Syria, because you have to remember their goal is to remove Assad from government and install a puppet regime, place the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency, and set up a private Western central bank, and pretty much void all those contracts with China and Russia, and then eventually they will then move into Iran and do the same exact thing. And this is their ultimate plan. They've never veered off of this plan. Even through the Geneva II talks, they always said, the only thing we have on our agenda is Assad stepping down. President Obama was out there saying Assad has no future. They closed all the embassies in the United States. They removed all the government officials from the United States. So there are no Syrian officials here except for the paid mercenaries. And now they're the new diplomatic liaisons or official government that will be moving into Syria. So we can see what is happening at this point. We can see they've been planning this, they've been moving this forward, and this is why we're seeing so many reports out there now about Al-Qaeda coming into the United States, Al-Qaeda running around the United States. We can't keep track of them. Syria is the launching pad for all these radicalized Americans that are coming back. Most of them are veterans. We need to keep track of them. They are continually pushing this agenda and pounding us with it on all the corporate media stations, in the newspapers, on the internet, because they want us to realize that something is definitely coming, and they have not stopped. And now the former NSA chief is out there saying, from all his intelligence and everything that he's known when he was in the NSA, there are more terrorist attacks on their way. They've already picked out targets, and we should expect all of this to happen. Of course, the NSA has never stopped any terrorist attacks whatsoever, because we know who's doing them. It's an inside job to place fear in the American people and to bring us into war or whatever agenda they have. And of course, this one is going to be to bring us into Syria and to bring us into war, because this is their ultimate plan. Let's get into the economic collapse news, and we're going to start off with gold manipulation. Now, of course, you know, months, years ago, when everyone says, look, gold's being slammed down, it usually happened during the week around 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, and all of a sudden we saw the gold, you know, slam down. It dropped, you know, $50, $60, $20 this time, but it was a huge, huge slam down. And now we're finding out that, yes, banks were doing this, probably under the instructions from the central bank, to keep gold suppressed so people don't realize what is happening here. And right now, Barclays has been fined for gold manipulation. They've been fined about $26 million for manipulating and setting the price of gold in order to avoid paying out on client orders. Furthermore, the FCA confirmed that those inexplicable gold raids, which come as if out of nowhere, and slam gold with a vicious force so strong sometimes they halted the entire market. Had a very specific source. Barclays, whose trader Daniel James Plunkett sent out a burst of orders aimed at moving the price of the yellow metal. This took place for a decade, and believe me, this is not the only bank. They're all in collusion. They're working together. They need to keep these prices down. If you notice at this point, every single time it goes above 1300, it is smacked back down, and it was done today too, back down below the 1300 mark. And this is done consistently over and over. And eventually when they lose control, you will see gold, silver skyrocket. And when you see it go up by 100, 150, you will know right there and then it is starting to take off. They can't control it anymore, and it's going to skyrocket. Okay, now as we know, the job market is absolutely horrific. I don't care what the government says. I don't care about their BLS numbers. I don't care that they're telling us it's 6.3% and it's dropping, because we know this is all manipulated. We know it's fake, it's false, it's phony. This is not real, because the companies that are laying off right now, they're not laying off 100 people or 1,000. They're laying off tens of thousands of people. And where are these people going to find jobs? Just today, what do we hear? Hewlett-Packard just announced laying off another 16,000 people. And the previous estimate number of eliminated positions will increase by between 11 to 16,000. This is in addition to the 34,000 layoffs already noted previously, meaning HP will fire a total of 50,000 people at this time. That is a lot of people. That's a lot of jobs lost. Where is all these people going? Sony's laying off, Dell's laying off, Barclay's laying off, RBS is laying off, UBS, Wells Fargo, Citibank. So many layoffs. And let's not even get started with retail layoffs. I mean, we're talking huge amount of number of stores closing, a huge amount of people who are out of work. It is getting worse. It is not getting better. And then we see this retail apocalypse right now, where we're looking at retail sales. We're coming out of the cold weather. We've been in spring. Actually, we're heading into summer now. And guess what? It's not getting better. They thought all this pent-up demand in winter was going to all of a sudden spring out, and everyone's going to run to the stores and buy all their goodies, and everything was going to be fine. But guess what? It didn't happen. Right now, U.S. retailers' profits missing estimates by most in 13 years. U.S. retailers missing estimates by 3.2%. And this is coming from Retail Metrics. Pent-up demand has analysis projecting a 8.6 surge in profits in Q2. Not going to happen. The American consumer is not fully back and remains cautious, says Ked Perkins from Retail Metrics. Yeah, the American consumer is not coming back. They're tapped out. They're unemployed, underemployed. They have no disposable income. They're not saving any money. They're just getting by. They are not coming back at all. This is done with. Most retail segments are showing profit declines, with department stores, teen apparel chains, home furnishing stores faring the worst. Retail Metrics said about 41% of retailers have missed estimates. So we can see right now, with all these stores closing, all these people being laid off, these fake unemployment numbers, we are not seeing an improvement in the retail market. And of course, during the summer, it is a huge downturn in retail sales. But again, if we look at Home Depot, Lowe's, and all those other stores, they have flowers, they have lawn care stuff, lawn mowers, grills, and guess what? No one's coming to buy that stuff whatsoever. Sales are imploding on themselves. It is not getting better. And of course, the corporate media is out there. They're saying, oh, new home sales. Oh my God, we're seeing this uptick. It looks so much better. And of course, I said there was going to be a little bump. But what's very odd about this bump, it's not happening in the Northeast. It's happening in the Midwest, which is very strange, because even the Census Bureau doesn't have much confidence in this bump in real estate. They're saying it's a very strange occurrence that this is happening, and most likely it's hedge funds, investment companies going out there buying these houses in cash, and this is where they concentrated in. The Northeast, they're seeing a dip in prices. The West, they're not seeing any type of improvement. And again, we have to remember what has happened. They have lowered the down payment threshold. I mean, now we're getting to the point where it's 5.3, and I see places that says 0% down. We're seeing the subprime is back. We're seeing the adjustable rate mortgages are back. So they are trying to push this real estate market as hard as they possibly can. But guess what? It is not moving anywhere. Now we understand coming up this July 1st, all banks in countries will need to work with the IRS under the new FATCA law. And this is the Foreign Account Tax Compliance. Now, Russia says they're not going to abide by this law. They're out. They're not going to allow the United States to get any information from their banks whatsoever at this time. Other countries have joined in, and what the United States is saying right now, if you do not abide by this law, we will sanction you. This is what they're telling the countries, because they are forcing them to abide by this IRS law because they want more revenue into the government. They realize Obamacare was a complete flop. The revenue is not being generated from it whatsoever. They're playing up the climate change card to impose a carbon tax on every single person. And of course, that money is not going to be used for anything except for government special interests. We also understand that the government right now is telling us, yes, we're going to raise taxes so we can improve the infrastructure of the United States. And we know for a fact this money will not go to the infrastructure whatsoever. They are trying their hardest to get as much revenue as they possibly can because the debt continually goes up. This cannot be sustained. They realize it, and they need more and more money coming in. So that's why they're looking all around the world to continually prop this system up. Now, out in Russia, we understand that they were going to create their own online system, their own online payment system, and they were going to say, you know what, Visa, MasterCard, you went along with these sanctions, so we're not going to deal with you whatsoever. We don't want to be put in this position whatsoever, so we're creating our own. Now, they're still in the process of creating their own, but what's interesting is Visa, MasterCard want to create a politics-free business in Russia and to organize its administrative system and property relations in such a way as not to be dependent on political risk or decisions made by governments. So they're very worried. That's what this is telling me. They are very worried they are going to lose a huge amount of business, and they're trying to say, listen, no, we'll work with you, Russia. Let us in here, and governments will not be able to persuade us in any way whatsoever, and we will work with you. And this went on to say that both companies voiced readiness to create a legal basis to administer their business and organize property relations in such a way as to avoid outside influence on their decision-making. International payment system Visa MasterCard have expressed their desire to create a Russian payment system operator, and this process will take around 1.5 years. So we can see what's happening here. Companies are actually starting to worry with these sanctions, what's going on, Russia pulling away from the dollar, China pulling away from the dollar, the BRICS nations pulling away from the dollar, other countries looking at this and getting very worried, saying, which side should we be on right now? The dollar's dying, yuan is rising, China has made deals all over the world for bilateral trade agreements, and they're setting up clearinghouses all over the world to deal in the yuan/renminbi. We see Russia pushing their ruble. They're both being backed by gold. They're continually buying gold. United States not buying any gold whatsoever. Dollar is devaluing every single day, and we're seeing central banks and countries removing the dollar from their reserves. So, this is a tough decision, but we better, hedge our bet here and go with the yuan and renminbi just in case that dollar completely collapses, which it's going to do. Now, China is ready to replace EU investors in Russia if more sanctions follow. The Chinese investors are ready to replace European companies if the EU goes on with the irresponsible policy of sanctioning Russia. The Chinese are prepared to step in if we are squeezed out through sanctions or other measures. I've heard about 20 or 57 Chinese high-tech companies ready to move in and replace Alstom, Siemens, BASF, and Bayer. And those are just a couple of the companies. So if this happens and these companies are, like, oh no, we can't do business here, China is going to replace them in Russia. So they're already making preparations right now. And again, we notice that the EU and the United States government, the central bankers, are not placing full sanctions on Russia, the country itself, because they are very, very nervous. Because if they do that, it will have a boomerang effect, and we will see EU and the United States completely crumble on itself, implode on itself, and everyone in these countries are going to look at the Fed, the central bankers, the United States government, the EU governments, and say, what did you just do here? You just collapsed the entire system, and now our money is worth nothing. We can't get by. Riots are in the street, and everyone is going to turn to the governments and the central bankers and blame them. They do not want this. This is why they were very careful in placing these sanctions on individuals. Now, we understand this whole VA fiasco is going on, and Obama's pretending he knew nothing about it when he actually did. We see the VA has two separate lists here, and it looks like there's more and more evidence saying that, yes, the VA is completely hiding and manipulating the numbers of people on waiting lists. And there are new reports out in Louisiana from 2010 saying there's 23 employees at a facility in Shreveport were placed on leave after accusations by a whistleblower that employees were participating in falsification of the records. So we can see this is really getting out of hand right now, and it's disgusting how these people treat our men and women who served in the military. They come back, they're injured, they're sick, their pensions are being slashed, they're not even getting the treatment they need. They went out to all over the world to protect the United States. It doesn't matter if they knew or not that they were doing this for the central bankers. In their hearts, they believed they were serving their country for freedom so everyone can live a free life. And again, these people gave up their lives, went across to other countries, and they knew that they could be killed. They come back to this country, and the way the government is treating them is absolutely horrific. Of course, our government officials, our fearless leaders, they're sitting in the Capitol with golf courses, gyms, private restaurants, perks, the best health benefits, and what are they doing? They're just sitting there every day in their suits, looking at a computer screen, trying to make more and more money. These are not leaders. Leaders don't act this way. Leaders are always in the front leading. These people are not leading anything. They cared nothing for the American people. I mean, look, in a moment's notice, they will send our men and women to war with not even giving two thoughts. Of course, they're not going to war. Again, look at Obamacare. They were telling everyone how great Obamacare was. They were telling us that, hey, everyone should take it. It's fantastic. But they were exempt. They didn't sit down in front of the TV. They didn't say, hey, look, I'm signing up. Look at us. Our president didn't even do that. Our vice president didn't do this. This is not leadership. Now, the FBI, the head of the FBI, is out there, and he understands why people are worried about the scope of the government's powers. And in fact, he agrees with them. I believe people should be suspicious of government power. I am, Director James Comey told the Senate Judiciary Committee on Wednesday morning, and I completely agree with him. We should all be worried about government. Government is getting too big, too powerful. Government thinks they're God. Government thinks we need to listen to whatever they say and do whatever they say. This is not why the government is there. The government is put into place to be the secretaries of the people, to handle the everyday tasks of keeping everything in order. Okay, now, We talked a lot about these fusion centers, DHS, how DHS was created not to stop terrorists, but DHS was created to spy on the American people, to create social profiles of each person, to create lists of who's going to be a threat to the authority, the powers in the government. And what we come to find out is that, yes, this is all true. This is why DHS was created, and this is why they created the fusion centers. There is a report out there, a 4,000-page report, and it shows that from the Partnership for Civil Justice Fund, during a 2-year-long investigation, these fusion centers have been put into place to spy on the American people, to make sure there are no threats among the American people, to hear what they're planning, to see what they're doing, and they've been doing this for quite a while. And this is why the fusion centers have been put into place. And the fusion centers work with all different agencies, the Pentagon, the FBI, local law enforcement. So we can see that all of this, even though the government was out there, and I've always said this before, every time the government tells us something, it is always opposite. They told us we're creating DHS to fight terrorism. They'll making sure they'll control everything. But what we're seeing is the actual opposite. DHS has been put into place to monitor and control the American people. Now, we all understand the NDAA, and if you don't know what that is, that has been put into place to detain any type of terrorist or domestic terrorist. So even if you're an American and the president says, oh, I believe that person's a domestic terrorist. I mean, we saw this happen in the Bundy Ranch with Harry Reid out there calling those people domestic terrorists. As soon as you're labeled a domestic terrorist, the NDAA goes into effect, and they can come down, pick you up, put you in a prison for a year without due process. And right now, there was an amendment that was supposed to be going through Congress, the U.S. House of Representatives, and it was shot down. And right now, the indefinite detention of Americans under the NDAA stands. So they didn't look to remove it. It has not been removed. So this is in full force. Now, why are they keeping this in full force? Because they understand what is happening. This is why Obama fought so hard and continually brought it back, and I'm talking about his administration, continually brought it back to the court system to continually try to push it and keep it in the NDAA. Even though he told us he wasn't going to do that, they understand, of course, the central bankers, the powers, the elite, say, no, 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 this has to stay, because when this thing comes down, we need a way of rounding up the people. This will be the easiest way. And of course, I hate to say this, but the NDAA is null and void according to the Constitution. This law doesn't exist because we have the law of the land. Nothing can override this. And you absolutely get your day in court. You have to be presented with why they're charging you. And of course, they're trying to get around this because what they would like is to get the Bill of Rights completely removed so they can do whatever they want whenever they want. Now, out in Thailand, we're seeing that there was a coup, even though they told us, the armed forces said there was not going to be a coup, but there was a coup, and the Thai army chief declares himself the acting prime minister at this time. Now, in my other reports, I was saying that, we'll have to see which way this goes. Will this new government be the government that is friendly with the United States central bankers, or will this government be the government that is not with the United States central bankers? And we can tell which way they're going to go depending on what the U.S. does. Usually, if it's not a government that they want in power, they stop all aid to the country. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. We are seeing that the State Department says it has suspended $3.5 million in military aid to Thailand. We don't like this government. It's not part of our puppet regime, so we're not going to give them any more money because they're not going to cooperate with us. Thailand is a U.S. treaty ally and close military partner, not for much longer. Secretary of State John Kerry on Thursday said there was no justification for the coup that followed months of political turmoil in Thailand. He urged the immediate restoration of civilian government and return to democracy. What he's really saying is, we want the puppet government back in power. We will then continue aid. Plus, we'll have the control of the country. By doing this, you're removing our puppet regime, and now we don't have control of this country anymore. This is not what we like. And we can see this is what the United States does, the central bankers all around the world. We see it in Ukraine, we see it in the Middle East, and we see it in Central Africa. There is absolutely no difference whatsoever. Now, Russia is strengthening its military bases all around the world at this time. They're working with Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and all the other nations, and they're bringing in more sophisticated weapons, and they're really tightening and really pumping up their military bases because they understand what is happening around the world. They understand the central bankers are going to continue with their push for war, and they will not stop. No matter what all these other countries do, China, Russia, North Korea, Syria, Iran, and all the other BRIC nations, all the other countries that do not have a private Western central bank, they understand what is coming. They understand the central bankers are going to continually push their agenda, and they will not stop. Now, it looks like, and we've said this in the past, that the reason why the United States central bankers took Ukraine was to first control the entire country, to steal the natural resources, and of course they stole the gold already, to place them on the EU system, to keep the whole system propped up, and eventually put them onto NATO. And what happened since that time is that Crimea had a referendum, they voted to be with Russia, now they joined Russia, and we see Donetsk, Lugansk, and Kharkov all voting with referendums to remove themselves from this puppet regime. So they have what's left of the country, and that is the west side of Ukraine. And of course, the Kiev government doesn't see that. They still see it as they're all, they own the whole country here. And the puppet regime right now, Tymoshenko, she said, we need to make a strategic decision. This decision is the ascension of Ukraine to the system of collective security and defense of NATO. Ukraine may hold a NATO ascension referendum as soon as June 15th for Ukraine to join NATO. So here we are. This is exactly what they wanted. This is why NATO has been in Ukraine at this time, because they knew eventually they were going to vote, have a referendum, and have Ukraine join NATO. This was their original plan. So here they are. They're still pursuing it, and they're still moving into this area. Now, we understand in Ukraine their elections are coming up on May 25th, which is in 2 days, and there are news crews that want to get in there, and it seems like a RT Spanish crew was denied entrance. They do not want them monitoring the elections whatsoever, so they threw them out, and they're doing this to other news agencies. Because you have to remember, this is an open election system that the puppet regime is going to have. Of course it isn't. We know this is not true. We understand they already have the people that they chose, that they're not going to let the people freely elect a new government in there that the United States can't control. Look at Thailand. As soon as this coup took place and the puppet regime was removed, they stopped all aid to the area. Every time they lose control, there's no reason to send the aid anymore because the puppet government is not doing what they want. So the same thing is happening in Ukraine. Now, Cyber Berkut, they said 2 days before the presidential election in Ukraine, the hacker group Cyber Berkut, which has repeatedly posted on the internet documents incriminating the new Kiev authorities, stated that they had destroyed the electronic system of the Ukraine's Central Elections Commission. So we will have to see what happens. They're producing information. They're saying they destroyed their election process, and we'll have to see how this plays out because the election is in 2 days now. Putin is out there saying, and he's blaming the United States central bankers for this full-scale civil war in Ukraine. It has evolved into a civil war, and it really has. We have the southeast section and the west of Ukraine now fighting with each other, and the battles are getting worse. The anti-terrorism have been intensified. They're going through the final stage here, and it will get bloody. Now, with regards to Iran, we understand that the interim time frame is running out. That comes up on July 20th. And we also understand there's a confidential document, which no one's really not allowed to see. It's not really classified, but there's only a certain number of people allowed in to view it. You have to remove your camera phone. You have to sign in. You have to go into a special room to look at it. You can't bring it out of there. You can't make copies. And right now, Washington may revive direct talks with Iran in a bid to settle a protracted nuclear standoff by July. The secretive diplomatic track last year helped the United States and 5 other countries to finalize a temporary accord restricting some of Tehran's bomb-usable atomic efforts in return for curbs on economic sanctions. Now again, this is being held as a secret. Nobody can know what this says, and they're looking to do the same thing before the July 20th date is. Now, why won't they let the American people and the rest of the world see this? Because it has to do with something with the central banks. Because their whole agenda is to move into Iran. I mean, you have to remember, for the last 30 years, their agenda was to get into Iran, remove the government, put a puppet government in its place, put their natural resources on the U.S. dollar, and void all the contracts they have with Russia and China and all the other countries. It's the same thing that's happening in Syria. This is why this part of it's so secretive. We had the IMF come into Iran, check out the banks, and what they really want is control of their banking system. They want all oil sold using the U.S. dollar, and they're going to try this attack once again with these secretive meetings. We'll have to see how it plays out. We'll have to see what happens. But again, they're keeping the propaganda continually moving forward with Iran having nuclear weapons. Iran is cyber attacking, and they're not going to let that go, because once that July 20th date passes and nothing happens, they will use that tactic to get into Iran. Now, Syria is trying to remove their last batch of chemical weapons, and of course, as we know, it's very difficult to move it when you have the paid mercenaries blocking the roads and making it very difficult for them to move the last part of it out there. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons says the last batch of Syria's chemical weapons has been packed and will be taken out of the country as soon as the security situation permits. Now, Syria is making a full frontal assault on the paid mercenaries because they want these chemical weapons out of the country, because they have to abide by the agreement that was made between Syria, Russia, and the United States. So they are making a full push to remove the paid mercenaries and get these chemical weapons out of the area at this time. Now, we understand the elections are coming up in Syria. They're going to happen on June 3rd, and you have to remember the paid mercenaries will not allow this to happen. They're going to do everything they possibly can to stop it, and already more than 20 people were killed when Syrian rebels shelled a tent being used for election campaigning. They do not want these elections to go forward. Actually, I think they might even try to assassinate Assad, and if they cannot get to Assad, they will push an event someplace in the United States and in Europe. And we can see that these explosives that the State Department had, they were shipped all across the world to certain embassies, to Ukraine and other unknown locations. We see a lot of other strange things happening with Al-Qaeda being pumped up as propaganda. We see them continually saying that Assad has been using chemical weapons. Of course, it was chlorine, and they're continually pushing that, even though it wasn't him, it was the paid mercenaries. But they want this to be kept in everyone's mind, and they want you to understand that he's still capable of doing this, because this will help them with their story when the next event hits. Now, Senator John McCain is out there, and he says the administration missteps in Syria would eventually come to the shores of the United States. He argued Syria is the new breeding ground for al-Qaeda terrorists, and said U.S. citizens have gone to Syria to train and are returning to possibly carry out terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. They are continually pushing this. They are not stopping. Now, we understand down in Nigeria, this whole kidnapping of 200 girls is a ploy to get the United States military down into that region. They have 80 military personnel in Chad right now because the Nigerian government will not let them in at this time. But guess what they're doing? And like I said in my other reports, we have to look at this and look at how they do things. Before they always tell us that, oh, look, there's an influx of terrorism there. We have to close the embassies. Oh, let's put up some travel advisories saying no U.S. citizens should go to Nigeria. And we're starting to see that come about right now. Just listen to what they're saying. Boko Haram may be planning an attack on U.S. interest in Nigeria. Intelligence and counterterrorism officials in Washington are now on full alert. U.S. intelligence officials, speaking with NBC News on condition of anonymity, declined to characterize the nature of the evidence other than to say it was recent and non-specific. Ooh, that means this is all made up. They have no information whatsoever, and the person who's telling us this is nobody. They're just putting it out there as propaganda. They also said that Boko Haram's desire to strike against a U.S. target apparently has been heightened by the increasing U.S. involvement in the hunt for the 276 missing Nigerian schoolgirls abducted by the group last month. A U.S. intelligence official agreed that an attack on U.S. target is something Boko Haram leader has long aspired his followers to carry out. All of a sudden, they've been aspiring to do this against the United States interests in Nigeria all along. And as soon as you see another bomb or something go off, it will be close to United States interest. All of a sudden, you'll see embassies close. You'll see travel advisories. They are playing this up one step at a time. The U.S. intelligence official said security at the embassy and other diplomatic facilities in the capital are on high alert. It is coming, everyone. It's exactly what we said was going to happen, and they're following their playbook perfectly. And we can see it. It happens right in front of our eyes every single time. Now, the Justice Department right now is really beefing up this propaganda of terrorists in the United States. They're even pushing it further by having the U.S. Justice Department, what they're doing is they're deepening its monitoring of Americans fighting in Syria due to fears about the potential domestic terrorism threat they pose. The department has appointed a special prosecutor to investigate individuals, including U.S. nationals, veterans, who traveled to Syria to join the opposition. FBI was established a special unit to learn the identities of U.S. citizens who have traveled, who are traveling to the Arab country to join the revolution. They are really pushing this forward. They are doing this on purpose because they understand that this event is about to happen. And of course we have the former NSA chief. He is out there. This is General Keith Alexander. The former head of the spy agency warned in an interview with the New Yorker of a growing number of potential attacks on the U.S. A former top U.S. security official fears the nation could be attacked again by terrorists. The number of attacks that are coming, the probability, it is growing, and we will see these attacks. What I saw at NSA is that there is a lot more coming our way. We're at greater risk. Alexander said, look at the way al-Qaeda networks, from al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and now in Syria. These attacks have already been planned. These attacks are coming to the U.S. We will see this false flag event occur because what is happening around the world, their plans, the United States central bankers' plans, are falling apart. They are losing control in Libya. They are losing control in Lebanon. They are losing control in Iraq. They are placing more and more U.S. soldiers into Central Africa because wherever China is, that's where the United States of America is. Central bankers are, because they do not want China to take control of these regions. They want the natural resources. They're losing control of Thailand at this point. They've completely lost control of Ukraine. So what do they have left? Well, the rebels, the paid mercenaries in Syria, are being beaten. Assad is taking control of the country. We see a drill now in Jordan, and of course we always know they brought in military assets. They've been training thousands upon thousands of soldiers there. There's 13,000 soldiers for a supposed drill during the same time frame as the elections. So we know this has all been planned from the beginning. And we will see something occur. Just the other day and months ago, we saw the dry run, a physical dry run on the power grid. We see a dry run with a cyber attack on the power grid. They are getting ready for this next event. They need to do this because they need to cover up this entire economic collapse. As we look at the economy every single day, all we see is things are falling apart in retail, in real estate, in jobs. Countries are dumping the dollar. China, Russia, the BRIC nations are all coming together. They're getting ready to make the yuan renminbi the reserve currency of the world. The central bankers are not going to let this happen. They will have an event. They will start a war to cover this entire thing up. Listen, everyone. Thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.